It is one of the great jobs on the Canadian cultural firmament, Chief Executive Officer of the nearly century-old Toronto Symphony Orchestra. But the job comes with a to-do list that could sink a tuba, and it now belongs to Matthew Loden, who left a similar job with the Philadelphia Orchestra to come here. Let's find out why, as we welcome Matthew Loden to our studios. Great to have you here.
Terrific to be here.
Why don't we just pick up from where that intro left off? You had a real nice job in Philadelphia, so why leave not only that job, but that country to come here?
Well, there were, this is a small musical world. The opportunity to manage world-class orchestras in North America, and so when those opportunities appear, you want to make sure that you do everything you can to take advantage of it. And what I saw in Toronto was something that I felt like was perfectly aligned with who I am as a leader, as a musician myself, and as someone that is, generally speaking, pretty hungry to take on challenging opportunities and see what I can do with it. And so the sense of being in an orchestra like this and being in a place that's so vibrant and alive like Toronto, I couldn't say no.
There is an understanding, I think, that whoever is going to be the maestro at the head of the orchestra can be from anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But, you know, us Canadians, we Canadians, excuse me, can be pretty parochial sometimes. Have you run into the, oh, you're American, eh? Have you run into that yet?
People have been incredibly kind and diplomatic, and sometimes I get a sympathetic sort of, oh, you're American. I'm sorry for your trials and tribulations right now. But what I have generally found is that people are just really enthusiastic about having an opportunity to know what the Toronto Symphony Orchestra is trying to do, what our dreams and aspirations are. I have been able to put together a pretty good track record in Philadelphia and other places where I've had the opportunity to work, and I think there's generally a sense of enthusiasm, not just about me, but the fact that we have Sir Andrew Davis on the podium right now doing a remarkable job as our interim music director, and that we just announced that we're going to have this brilliant, absolutely extraordinary music director coming in 2020 named Gustavo Gimeno.
Hold off on him. We're going to get back to him in a second.
But all of that rolls up into people being really welcoming.
But when you take over a job like this, we suggested again in the intro, you've got 1,000 things to do, and they probably all need your attention all at once. How do you prioritize your to-do list? Well, you know, there are fundamental things that have to happen when you're new to a job like this. And most importantly, I feel like, is the listening skill set. It's relatively easy to come into a new situation and decide that you know what needs to be done and start executing on what your own personal vision is. But I find that generally is not successful and oftentimes is naive and can be even damaging. And so I've approached being here as a series of uncoverings where I'm trying to discover what are the things that are actually incredibly successful, that are already working really well at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. What are we doing in community outreach and education? What are we doing on stage that is really brilliant? How are we bringing up the next generation of Canadian artists? And as I'm discovering that, I'm learning where we might be able to tweak things here and there to have an even different sensibility around what this orchestra can be for the community. What's job one?
Job one is making sure that we are putting on stage the most exciting, visceral, engaging art possible. And while you have a symphony orchestra of 93 musicians who can play an incredibly exciting sense of...
That's not what you wanted to say. You wanted to say who can play their asses
well,
off. That's
you know,
what you
you're
wanted
right.
to say.
You're right. I wanted to go a little bit further. You're right. They are deeply impressive as a collection of musicians, and that is a priority. But the other priority is to make sure that enough people around the GTA know what's happening in Roy Thomson Hall. And the way that we get to do that is making sure that we get out of the hall more than we've been able to do in the past.
Well, I was going to say, this is, I mean, you've been here for several months now, so you've got a sense of the place. This is an absolutely enormous city.
It's huge.
And the notion that somebody who lives, let's say, just 6 subway stops north of this station right now,
right,
might need an hour or an hour and a half to commute to your concert hall near the waterfront of Toronto, is just a non-starter for so many people. So what do you do about that?
Well, we do things like we have a concert series at George Weston. So we also try to...
the north part of the city.
To the north part of the city, exactly. We do runouts whenever possible. We are in the process of trying to figure out, are there ways that we can be even more flexible with the orchestra and have smaller groups go out to actually engage with people? It's not the symphonic effect of a Strauss tone poem, but ultimately we're sharing our music and we're having a conversation with people in different neighborhoods throughout Toronto, and that's what's so important.
Now you're taking over at a time when obviously Maestro Peter Ungen had just left,
yes.
so obviously a huge part of your job is going to be to find his replacement.
Yes.
And I wonder, again, sort of peel the curtain back a bit and tell me how it works. When the headhunters come to you and say, okay, Matthew, we're interested in you for Toronto, but we got to know who you want to be the guy before we hire you. Is that what happens?
In some instances, that's what happens. Luckily for me, that's not what happened here with the TSO. What happened was headhunter said, Matthew, we think this is a really great fit. And what I was able to say is terrific. Now let's talk about what have you already done? What's in process to find the next music director? And what I learned was that there had actually been an extraordinary collection of board members, staff members, and musicians who had already been assembled for about a year and had begun to describe what it was that they wanted in a new music director for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. So that collaborative sense, that consensus building, there was an incredibly effective process already in place that I could just fold into, have influence with, and be very much a part of making that final selection. But it was something that the organization needed to decide. And you know, it's like in any ensemble, right? It's you're only as good as your collective is. And in this sense, I think they did a phenomenal job of figuring out Gustavo.
Ultimately, are you the decider?
Yes.
So you picked him.
Well, no. We picked him together. I am the decider on a number of different things that have real impact for the organization, but I wanted to make sure, and our committee, the selection committee for the music director, wanted to make sure that the person that we collectively decided on was going to be the right one, and that's what happened.
Sheldon, here's the guy. Let's see him. Now, besides the fact that he's young and brilliant and talented and looks like a model.
Right, right.
What do you like about this guy?
This is somebody who has a wide-reaching intellect, and the things that he thinks about artistically, I think, are incredibly important. But beyond that, he has an emotional sensibility about people, about how they work, that is really remarkable. He spent 11 years as a principal percussionist in the Concertgebouw Orchestra in Amsterdam. And the experience that he had as a musician in one of the top orchestras in the world, sitting in the back of the section, knowing when to play the solo, when to fit in, when the triangle and the percussion needs to be loud, when it's part of the ensemble, watching other conductors, that gave him an unbelievable laboratory to figure out what to do when he's on the podium himself. And so he's been able to translate all that deep musical orchestral experience into knowing exactly what it means to lead an organization like this.
How well did you know him before you signed him?
I knew him by reputation. He was somebody who, he's only been on sort of the world stage as a conductor for a few years. But in this industry, there's always sort of a background chatter amongst artist managers and CEOs and different people that are in this field about the up-and-coming talent. And it didn't take more than a couple of performances for Gustavo to be on the podium where, you know, you'd get a phone call from a colleague who'd say, you know, I've kind of got a short list of really wonderful people that we want to book in a few years, and I just put this guy on it. You should pay attention.
He's going to be one of these guys like Madonna or Liberace or Cher or Pele, who are just going to be known by one name, right?
Exactly.
He's going to be Gustavo.
Well, it's interesting. There's another Gustavo in L.A. With a different orchestra. So we might eventually have sort of a warring Gustavo thing going on with great symphonies.
Now he's got obviously commitments that will take him for another couple of years, I guess, before he takes over with the TSO.
Yes.
Is that or I shouldn't say is that, because it is. How problematic is that going to be for you, trying to sell concerts in the interim until he takes over?
Oh, it's not problematic at all. It's a huge opportunity because what we're able to do is actually welcome Gustavo here at the end of June, the end of this season, for a series of concerts. In fact, we originally scheduled him for 2 concerts, but it's been so popular we've added a 3rd concert for people to see him for the first time. And next season, he will come back and visit. I'm not going to tell you exactly when because we haven't announced that yet. So what this allows the institution to do is to actually continue under the, like I said before, the incredible leadership of Sir Andrew Davis. He was
here. He was the maestro, what, 20 years ago?
Exactly.
Maybe? Yeah.
He's been back and forth. He was the music director for a number of years, and he's been on the podium often and has a remarkably comfortable and collaborative relationship with the musicians. And so we're very much enjoying having him on the podium, working through programmatic things with him that are, I think, making some really exciting concerts happen.
Now, you can't talk about symphony orchestras nowadays, I'm afraid, without talking about another M word, not music, but money.
Yes.
Because, well, it's touch and go for so many of them, and many of them are shutting down as a result. How much money do you have in your foundation right now, the TSO?
There's $30 million in the foundation right now, so that's essentially our endowment.
And what do you do with that?
Well, every year there is, the way it's set up is that the corpus, the money that's invested, generates income. It generates a draw that you take every year, and that is part of your regular planning. And that's
for operations?
For operations, exactly.
How much, I mean, 30 million sounds like a lot of money, but maybe compared to the, New York or LA or something, it's not, I don't know. How does it stack up?
Well, the operating budget of the TSO is about $32 million. And generally speaking, for instance, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, I think, has an endowment of about $475 million.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, so that's...
More than 10 times bigger.
Yes, yes. So that's much more directly aligned with what you want to ultimately achieve. In a perfect world, the Toronto Symphony would have a $150 million endowment right now, and that would spin off enough regularized income for us to not have to fundraise on a daily basis quite so aggressively, shall we say. But one of the things that's really been quite extraordinary about the last couple of years is that we closed last year with actually a $2.3 million surplus. It was a planned surplus. It went directly to go to pay down some of the debt from past accumulated deficits, and we're very much on a strong fiscal path forward, which is really important. People need to understand that if they're going to make a philanthropic investment in us, that they know where the money is going to go, that it's going towards the right kinds of things to support great music, great education, and great connectivity throughout the GTA.
Are there enough rich millionaires in Toronto who love symphony music that can help you go from $30 million in your foundation to 430?
I think there are. I think that there is some extraordinarily generous Canadians here. And I think that the job is to not go after the money and the rich people so much. It's to make sure that we focus on what we are trying to do within Toronto that is not just at Roy Thomson Hall. Raising money is a byproduct of an organization and a cultural destination that actually has a kind of connectivity and importance and value to the citizens around it. And the more that we can make sure that we're hitting all of those points the right way, then the money will eventually follow.
You are, unlike most executives of most symphony orchestras, I think, in as much as you can play.
Yes.
What do you play?
I'm a violinist.
And have been for how long?
My entire life.
You took up the instrument at what age?
I was 7 years old when I first started playing, and was one of 25 American students selected when I was, I think, probably 9 years old, to tour with Dr. Shinichi Suzuki, who brought the Suzuki violin training program to America for the first time. So when I was very young, I had the opportunity to do a national tour, and that kind of really got music into my blood.
Given that you can play, given that you are a musician,
Yes.
not just an executive, I presume that gives you added insight into what the 93 musicians who are in the Toronto Symphony are thinking about as it relates to your arrival. What do you think they worry about with this new guy on the scene?
Well, I hope they don't worry. I hope there's very little worry about the new guy. I think that there is always a period of relationship building and getting to know each other, and the TSO has had over the last decade has a number of different people in the leadership role, and so I think that they have a sense that I know what it feels like to be on stage. I know what's important. I know what the support is that's required. Operationally, I understand the rhythm of rehearsals and performances and how different repertoire has a different impact on the way in which you're performing and the way in which you're preparing. And I think that there is a tacit appreciation for that sort of knowledge base that I have. But at the end of the day, the brethren of musicians, it only goes so far, right? Because the musician's job is to do incredible things on stage, to share the music, to go out into the community and be a part of things. My job is to make sure that I do everything possible to support that, which includes the fundraising, the public relations, the board development, all of those other administrative tasks.
Are you ever going to play with the orchestra?
Unlikely, but
It's not a no.
But we'll see. It's not a no.
Do you worry if you don't keep playing, your skills will diminish?
Sure, but you know, it's and there's no question. When I was at when my full-time job was to be a professional violinist in New York or DC or many other places, it included 3 hours of practice a day on top of the rehearsals and the concerts.
You can't do that anymore.
I can't do that anymore. But what I can do is approach the instrument from not a standpoint of I have to work really hard to practice to sound great because this is my livelihood. I can instead approach playing the violin as something that is utterly joyful and a great opportunity for me to kind of recenter, get back to what I know I can do successfully. And so I've lowered my bar of professional musical expectation just a little bit, but I can still get through a lot of repertoire and feel really good about it.
I am wondering what's going to happen, Matthew, when you have that first moment, you're looking at the program that's coming up for the upcoming year, and you see that whatever it is, Beethoven, whatever, and you think, oh man, I know I can play that so well. I know I can nail that. I so want to play, but I probably shouldn't. You're ready for that moment?
I'm absolutely ready for that moment. Executive restraint is something that's a very important part of the job here, and I will tell you that there's such a deep satisfaction from just being in the house with the other people, the other patrons that are experiencing the music coming off the stage. Oftentimes that's all the satisfaction that I need, and if that means after a concert I run home because I was inspired and I play in my living room, that's good enough.
Okay. Last question. You get to complete the following sentence. My time at the Toronto Symphony, however long it will be a success if I can, what?
If I can establish a relationship between this city and this orchestra that has longevity because everyone cares about it so much, they want it to be here forever.
From your lips to God's ears.
You're here.
Matthew Loden is the new CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. We welcome him to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and wish you well with that mission.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.